All right, in this video, we're going to build a scrollytelling experience using AI to HTML. So typically, you build a graphic, a beautiful, beautiful graphic in Adobe Illustrator. You export it to a web page, and that's the end of your AI to HTML process. But no longer. If you watched the last video, we talked about how to enable JavaScript interactions through the magic of SVG and layer and object naming. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend you do it. But if you don't feel like it, you might as well come along. Some things probably won't work for you, but you can go back and see what you need. So what our goal here is today is we are going to take this graphic that we have right here and turn it into a scrollytelling experience, where as we scroll down the page, certain things fire, certain things show up on the page, certain things get highlighted, and then they all go away. So we're using a library called Scrollama. It is the best library in the world. Recommend it if you are getting involved in scrollytelling, whether using AI to HTML or not. We're also using a little bit of D3, everyone's favorite data visualization library. You don't have to use D3, it just makes a couple things a little bit shorter to type for me, and I'm lazy, so I'm going to stick with it. So let's get started. We are going to be using a template that I made. I'm going to put a link on where to find the template in the description below. It's just a pretty boring template. It just has a few different steps on it. We're going to fill it all out today. So I'm going to copy it, going to paste it on into a new folder, and I am going to call it index.html. Now, there's all kinds of stuff in here. Even though it looked pretty boring, got a lot of CSS, it includes some JavaScript. This part here is for the scrollytelling bits. D3 here is just so I can control things as they display on the page. This CSS kind of sets the stage for keeping your graphic in the same place as you scroll. This is the place where we're going to paste our AI to HTML output. These are the steps that our scrollytelling experience goes through. This is the kind of thing that you will edit when you make this your own story. And then down here is where we set up Scrollama. So I'm going to go over this a little bit later. The extra code on here doesn't even matter. It's the resizing script for AI to HTML. It is a little bit busy on this page, what with all of this JavaScript and the CSS, and we're going to paste this in here. It's just because I hate relying on people managing multiple JS and CSS files. So I figured I would just put it all on the same page. If you want to separate it out later, fine by me, don't really care. All right, first thing we want to do is we want to fill in this AI to HTML output area. So we're going to open up our file, already organized all the SVGs, all the naming, all of that. File, scripts, other script, AI to HTML.js. It's going to run. It is going to throw everything into AI to HTML output. If we look at countries, .html, this is what we're looking for. So this is going to be our baseline for our interactive graphic. This is going to be a responsive piece, which is why there's a large version and a small version. So when someone moves to, let's say, mobile, instead of being on desktop, they'll get the small version instead of the big one. Now, we need to move all of these files over to where we're working. Honestly, we don't need these SVG files. One of the options that we added was inline SVG true. So all of that SVG content is actually in the HTML file. So we're going to ignore those. We're just going to pull artboard 3 and artboard 4. So I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste it right on in here. Let me confirm that that still works. Yep, even though we got rid of the SVG file, still works perfect. So what I am going to do is I am going to open up this countries.csv. This is all of my Illustrator code. It's much worse than it usually is because it has all of these pads and all of these lines and all these strokes and all this fill and just all this SVG stuff. But we don't really have to think about it at all. All we have to do is copy everything on the entire page, go into index.html, and then just paste it right in here. Now, one thing I'll note is there is a script tag and a style tag that comes with our AI to HTML. And that is because I added that down here. I said, hey, whenever we create our file, make sure you add this style tag and this script tag. So we do already have D3 included elsewhere on the page up at the top, so I might as well just delete this. And I'm going to move this hidden class that makes visibility hidden up to the top. You could honestly just leave it and it would be fine. But you know, just to make things look a little bit nicer, to make things be a little bit cleaner, I'm going to move it right up there. So, all right, we have pasted all that AI to HTML stuff in there. Let's see what it looks like. Let's open up our good friend index.html. All right, that looks fine right now. Like, it's not interactive, nothing's going on. But you know, we make the window smaller, it gets responsive, you know, drops these on 2 lines, makes it taller. Make it wider, it gets wider. So everything is good so far. That's always the first thing you want to check. You want to make sure that when you export, everything got to an okay situation. So what comes up next? All right, let's go look at what we're dealing with here. We have something that says nothing happens at this step. That's our first step. Okay, that's pretty boring. Then the next one says, the country I'm pointing at right now, it's a very big deal. So what that means is we want this thing right here that says this is an important country that we want to talk about. We want that to show up. Now, what that actually means is when we first load the page, it means we want that to not show up. So when we load the page, the very initial thing that we want to have happen is we want this to be hidden, this annotation here. Now, the easiest way to do this is probably to just memorize what's going on by looking at the layer names in Illustrator, but we'll do it the slow way where we're clicking and clicking and clicking. So what we want to do is we want to talk about this text here, text 1, and this arrow here, which is path 1. Now this is path 1 and text 1, and if we resize to make it bigger, this is going to be text 2, and this is going to be path 2. Path 2. So these are all IDs. I'm going to make a note down here. Right where it says Scrollytelling code goes under here. I'm going to say annotation is path 1, text 1, path 2, and text 2. So what we're going to do is when we load the page, this code automatically gets run. And what I'm going to have happen is I want D3 to go out and grab path 1. And I want it to add the class of, what's the class for hidden things? The class for hidden things is class of hidden. So class hidden true, and I'm going to do that for all of these. So path 1, text 1, path 2, and text 2. So as soon as the page loads, it is going to run all of this code. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh. And now magically it's gone. It's not there. Now, if we look over here, we can see that path 2 is still there. It's just that it has the class of hidden on it. If I took class of hidden off of it, it'd show back up. So it is hanging out there. It's just that when the page loads, it automatically disappears. So what we want to have happen is when we get to this step right here that says the country I'm pointing at right now, it's a very big deal. When we get there, we would like this annotation to show up. So what we're going to do is we have named this step. This step is called step 1. Nothing too crazy, just ID step 1. You can change the IDs to whatever you want. Just make sure it's always class step. So what we want to do is say, hey, when we get to step 1, let's show all of these elements here. So I'm going to say, hey, D3, go find the thing with the class of step 1. And now I want to listen for us to get to that step. I want when we get to this step, an event fires and it says we're at this step, and it's going to say, let's show what's going on here. Now, this is some of the customized code that I added to this page. So we're using a library called Scrollama. It's beautiful, wonderful, delightful. But it doesn't work perfectly with the way that I like to do step-by-step scrollytelling with D3. So I kind of customized it a little bit to add a couple custom events. One is called step in, one is called step out. When we hit this step, we are going to have step in be fired. So I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to say, hey, when it gets here, say got to step 1. That's all. So go find the step on the page, and when that event fires, run this code right here. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to go look at the console. Got to step 1. Got to step 1. Great. Beautiful. Oh, no, it's yelling at me there. What's it yelling at? Options. I don't know why it's saying that. It'll be fine. We'll be all right. There are no options, I suppose. Okay, so when we get to this, it says, hey, got to step 1. Great. Got to step 1, got to step 1, got to step 1. This number goes up because we keep getting to step 1. So what do we want to do whenever we get to step 1? Well, all of these were hidden before, but now what we want to do is say, hey, instead of the class hidden being added, we want it to be removed. So we're going to go through each one of those, and when we get to step 1, it is going to remove it. So refresh, scroll down, and bam, it shows it. Great, amazing. All right, step 2. What happens in step 2? Let's go look at the text. The ones being highlighted right now are all Africa. So I'm going to say, fine, when I get to step 2, what am I going to listen for? Step in, same as before. And then console.log got to step 2, just to make sure that our code is running fine. So this is us getting to step 2. Great, great, got to step 2, got to step 2, got to step 1, got to step 2, got to step 1. Perfect, everything's great. So what we want to happen now is we want to make, I'm going to go up to the top. If you try to select things here, if you try to mouse over your graphic and select content on it, you're not going to be able to see it because the scrolly overlay is what ends up being on top. The scrolly bit with the text is on top of your graphic. So what you have to do is scroll all the way to the top before this text shows up, and then you can select things inside your graphic. So right now, this is just a path. We don't want to select all the paths. If we scroll up, we will see that this is inside of a G. Now, it does have the ID of Africa 2. That's because we have a group called Africa, and it's split across 2 artboards. It's split across our mobile artboard and our desktop artboard. And as a result, we don't have just Africa as an ID. We have Africa and Africa 1. Now, if you had like 4 artboards, your life would be miserable. So what I like to do instead is, instead of looking for things based on this ID, I look for things based on the data name here. So data name is Africa is going to be the same for both this artboard and this artboard, even though one is ID Africa, one is ID Africa 2. So when we get to this step, I'm going to say, hey, D3, go out and grab everything that has the data name of Africa. And then if you want to get, hyper specific, these are paths, right? These are paths inside of that. So I'm going to say, go find that G element, find all the paths inside, and let's just make the stroke black. Are there better ways to do this that involve adding a class? Sure, but I just want to show you this is another way you can do it. So I'm going to save it. When we get to step 2, hopefully this code will run, and delightful. There we go. It has highlighted these Africa pieces over here. But there's a problem. And that problem is it still says this country is an important country that we want to talk about. Now, the worst part about scrollytelling is the fact that you have to think about going from step to step. And in this case, when we get to our second step, we actually have to undo what we did in that first step. we have to say, now that we're in the second step, let's hide this annotation. So in the same way that we hid it whenever we started this, whenever we first loaded the page, I'm just going to paste this on in here. And I'm going to make a note, and I'm going to say undo changes from step 1, do changes for step 2. Great, so now when we hit the second step, it's going to add the hidden class to all of those again, and then make that annotation disappear. So let's try it again. Refresh, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, annotation shows up, great. We get to this next one, and now, wonderful, same thing. Showed up, the highlights there, and then this disappeared. So everything's looking great. And now we're at the final step, and everything has been reset to the defaults. No, nothing has been set to the default. We need to go back and remove this stroke now. So what happens is when we get to step 3, and it has the ID of step 3, which is why we can say D3 select step 3. D3 select step 3. On step in, I am going to find all of those undo changes from step 2. And instead of setting the stroke to black, I'm going to set that stroke to none. So save it, refresh, go down, great, shows up, great, shows up, perfect. Everything's delightful, right? And I scroll up, eventually the Africa one shows up, scroll up. Oh, now we have the opposite issue, right? If we go to the first step from the second step, we also need to erase all of these strokes around the Africa circles. So let's also add this here. So in step 1, we'll undo changes from step 2, and then do changes for step 1. And I'll paste that in there. Let's try it again. Scroll down. This shows up perfect. Scrolling back up. This shows up. That shows up. And now we get to this first step. Once we get to this first step, we would also like this to disappear. Now, say we didn't have this first step. What we could do, because we have the first step, we can do this. We can say, hey, we call this step 0. I say when we get to step 0, what I want to do is undo the changes from step 1. And so that's going to be all this code here. Paste it on in here. It's going to add the hidden class to all of those bits and pieces. Now, this is probably the easiest way to do it. I'm going to be honest. So it's going to show when you hit this step, and as we go back up, it is then going to disappear. Another way you could do this is listen for when we leave this step. So I'm not going to go through all the code, but what we can do is we can say, look for step 1, and instead of step in, we're going to look for step out. So when we are stepping out, you're going to run this code if we are going in the up direction. So if we're scrolling up, e.detail.direction is always going to tell you the direction you're scrolling in, and it's going to do the same thing it did before. So we scroll up, and there we go, it disappears. It disappears before we go all the way up to this one. Now, an issue is when we're scrolling up, notice how it says the ones being highlighted right now are all Africa. We have to scroll so far before this ends up being hit, and it ends up triggering. Now, the reason why is if we scroll down to where we create this scroller here, I'm going to turn debug from false to be true. Shift enter. This dotted line that shows up right here is the line that means let's trigger this event. So when this text, the country I'm pointing at right now, when it hits that, bam, that means, hey, this is actually happening. If we don't like it to happen so far down low on the page, we can actually change where it's at. We can make it 0.5 for our offset, for example, and then it would happen in the middle of the page. Granted, this looks very ugly. Let's turn debug off again. And so now things don't show up until we hit halfway up the page. Where you want this to happen for you just depends on what you want, what your content looks like. I trust that you can play around with this number until it gets good. I've used numbers everywhere from 0.33 to 0.75, and it always ends up being okay. I'm just going to leave it at offset 0.5 for now. I want to show you one more thing. So we basically did all of this, right? This is now a Scrollytelling experience. Everything is nice. Everything is perfect. But I want to add one more fun little change, and that is called matching text. So if I see this text right here, it says this country is a very big deal, and it matches the color of important country. When I say the ones being highlighted right now are all Africa, it matches that color there. It's just like a fun design thing that I think looks great. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do this in the worst possible way, which is I'm going to write inline styles here. So I'm going to add a span tag around Africa and a span tag around very big deal. And for each one of these, I'm going to give them a background color. Style, background. Let's just make them yellow, because why not? So both of these are going to be yellow. And this just means, hey, just make this text right here yellow. Gonna save, gonna refresh. Very big deal. You know, that doesn't look bad, but it's not what I'm looking for. What I want is to make the color of this match the color of this. It's very easy with Chrome developer tools. Inspect this, and it's gonna say the background is yellow. If you click that little color swatch there, it'll open up a color picker. And then you can use this little eyedropper tool right here to select, bam. What color is this? Oh, C6 ED F7. I'm going to copy and paste this code, and I'm going to throw it right there. Now I'm going to do the same thing for Africa. I can scroll down, and I can say, okay, the background is yellow. And I say, no, I don't want yellow. I want this color. Copy, paste right into there. Oh, make sure you put a pound symbol in front of it or else it won't work very well. Save, and there we go. The colors are now going to match up. I think stylistically that just looks much, much nicer. One final thing you might want to fix up in here is the fact that we keep having this code written again and again and again and again and again and again and again. It's awful, right? There are a few different ways we could clean this up, but what I'm going to do is make a function called hide note and another function called show note. Anytime you have code that's being written again and again and again and again, it's probably better if you just move it into a function. So this code right here hides the note. So I'm going to paste right here inside of this function. Bam. It's going to hide, 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 hide. And then I'm just going to say, hey, instead of copying these 5 lines of code at a time, just go run hide note. If we are scrolling up on step 1, just run hide note. If you are looking to undo the changes from step 1, just run hide note. And now we can take this, and if we want to, I mean, honestly, we don't need to move this into show note. Here, let's not move this into show note. It's fine. We'll be okay. And so now our code looks a little bit cleaner in that we don't have this repeated again and again and again and again and again. And yeah, there you go. So everything's perfect. Everything's beautiful. Everything looks nice. Sometimes if you scroll really quickly, things don't work well. But in the end, that's just kind of how it is, and that's just what scrollytelling is to a point. Or if you want to break the page, mostly you can break the page. But for now, as long as we have like a nice leisurely scroll, we're going to be doing good. Going to be doing great. If you did want to change some things on this page, though, what I'd probably recommend paying attention to is step right here. So each one of these things right here is a step. And we can inspect it and we can look at it and we could say, okay, maybe we want to look at this a little bit more before we get to the next step. Because a big issue with scrollytelling is having things that overlap, right? Where if I only see this text when it's right on top of what I'm looking for, it's not going to work. It's going to be terrible. What we can do instead is if we look at div class equals step, you can change the margin bottom. So if we made this 35, it would be much bigger, much more space in between this. Another thing we could do is if you change for the text that's inside of this, this is styled with .step p. Maybe, if you have a larger paragraph or your text is a little bit smaller, you might say text align left, and then maybe you want to just make your font size 1 rem. And then you'll look slightly more professional, right? Like this looks a little bit classier, especially you have a lot of text going on. Whereas maybe the other one is a little bit more in your face. But that's normally what I would style. The background color, you can make it a little bit darker. You could tint it different colors, each one of these. All of this is all up to you. All of this style is fine. The stuff that you don't want to change in terms of style is pretty much anything under sticky thing, which is the graphic in the back, and probably the scrolly overlay here. Maybe you can get rid of max width. That's probably fine. But yeah, there you go. You now have a beautiful scrollytelling page. All you need to do in order to put this onto some other page that you are working on is steal these styles and then steal these script tags and then just copy all the code inside of the body tag. So you just cut and paste all of this and then it should magically work. The only time you will have an issue is if you try to do multiple scrollytellings inside of the same graphic. It might be a problem. It might not, depending upon the way that you set everything up. The thing that I would recommend changing if you do this is right now this says, hey, go look for our scrollytelling stuff inside of something with a scrolly, with the ID of scrolly. What you'll probably do instead is you will change your page to call it like scrolly2 or something like that. And so you'll change scrolly2 there. You'll change scrolly2 here. And then you'll copy and paste all of this code onto the page that you're attempting to publish this on. But yeah, that's it. Life is good. Just hit my GitHub repo and I will have this finished version for you along with the template and everything else you could ever need. Great job.